Now I'm secure enough in my manliness, no really, I mean it, to admit without shame that the first time I encountered living Combine soldiers I had nightmares for about 3 nights in a row. Ugh. Oh, it gives me the Willy Wonkas just thinking about it. The first time we find one of these chaps, the overwhelming urge is to pull off the gas mask and see for ourselves precisely what they are underneath. But no matter how many times you hit their dead bodies with the crowbar, the mask never comes off. Indeed, they're shaped like a human, but who knows what kind of horrific monster they are underneath. The general impression is that these guys are hardcore. They carry more body armor than a 15th century knight on horseback, and they have a much more powerful array of weaponry than the filth, such as their pulse rifles, and their sniper rifles with the lovely blue lasers, which disappointingly remain in their hiding places even after we blow the soldiers wielding them out with grenades. After we help Leon and his resistance members beat off the Combine attack, we hear the dreadful news from Alex that Eli Vance has been captured by the Combine, and that it is suddenly our sole responsibility to travel through an exceedingly dangerous wasteland and attempt to rescue him from an almost impenetrable Combine fortress/prison. Luckily for us, we do receive a certain measure of assistance.
Blind spider took the wheel, navigating grass blades completely by feel. Got a sassy chassis, sparkle in the sun. All 4 small bald fat tires, rocking through the sand and burning up. Little dune buggy in the sand, a little blue dune buggy in my hand. Okay, I got a rubber band motor humming on the beach, ready for fun. Quit spinning that web and come out and play in the sun. 8 thimble-sized cylinders to be as smooth as you please. The spider's badass fat old abdomen stuck in the bucket seat. Little dune bug out in the sand. Little blue dune bug out in my hand.
The scout car, like the airboat before it, is constructed from scavenged bits of this and that, probably junk out of a scrapyard. Though, to be honest, it looks somewhat more professionally made than the airboat. A curious thing about the scout car is that while there are 2 headlights on the front of it, they do not work, which is a shame, as there are a great number of lightless tunnels on Highway 17. The scout car makes it possible for Gordon to traverse very long distances, which otherwise you would not be able to cross. Now, while the airboat was more versatile in that it could proceed over both land and water, the scout car is much faster and allows us to outrun, or even run down, the many hazards that await us. The attached gun is not especially powerful, but it does have an unlimited supply of whatever that is that powers it, and it does make a lovely noise when it fires. And the ammunition crate on the back carrying extra magazines for the MP7 proves to be rather useful as well. There were many games before Half-Life 2 in which you piloted a vehicle. Well, the obvious ones like Gran Turismo and other racing games come to mind. But Half-Life 2, I think, was unique in a first-person shooter game in that it introduced vehicles that were completely controllable by the player. Now, even the first Half-Life, of course, had the train cars that we could drive, albeit only backward and forward. These cars were on rails and gave us almost no opportunity to really explore the environment or test the vehicle's capabilities. They were mere transport. But the 2 vehicles in Half-Life 2 allow us to explore large areas of the world and do so very quickly if necessary. We're somewhat constrained within the bounds of the map, of course, but there's still a relatively large amount of space to investigate or simply drive around in, and this alone is highly amusing. I think it was very wise for Valve to allow this freedom of movement regarding the vehicles, because it's very appealing to most players who do enjoy learning as much about the virtual world they're traveling through as possible. And besides all of that, it's simply cool to drive around a dune buggy with a gun on it. I have 3 favourite scout car moments. The first is when you have to play chicken with the train on the bridge. You can, however, pull slowly forward until the train appears, and then back up out of the way into safety, and then wait until the train passes, and then proceed forward. But I know what you're thinking, then where's the fun in that? The second part is when you leave the house and come back out to discover that a seagull has landed on and then besmirched your car. Typical. I just washed my own car 2 days ago and already some bloody bird has fouled it. The third and my favourite part is when Norco, quote-unquote, accidentally drops you from the crane into the swarm of antlions. Oh, terribly sorry, Dr. Freeman. I hope those murderous antlions don't give you too much trouble. God, never trust anyone named Norco. Leon warned us against the antlions, explaining to us that they're in mating season and so are probably that much more irritable and deadly. The antlions are really a great creature for Half-Life 2, and I suppose they're related somewhat to Earth's insecta class of organisms, as they all have an exoskeleton, wings, and 6 legs. But unlike Earth's insects, the antlions are the size of small ponies, and like to impale every living thing that is not an antlion with their sharp front legs and mouth parts. The antlions are very beautiful in a way. Well, when observed from a distance, as their shells glitter with iridescent violets, oranges, and greens. They seem to be able to burrow into any surface, especially sand, and the only things that keep them in check really are the few thumpers located here and there, which obviously send vibrations through the ground that the antlions cannot tolerate. While most likely a hive species, the individual antlions still seem to exhibit a certain degree of intelligence and independence. For instance, they know enough to attack the G-Man. Now, we've met some strange folks along our journey so far, but no one as yet has quite had the peculiarity of Odessa Cubbage. He's really an enigma, a real mystery. I refuse to refer to this gentleman as Colonel, as I have my doubts that he was even in the Salvation Army, let alone a general officer in the regular army. I think the title Colonel, frankly, is a name that he bestowed upon himself, as it's plain to see that the back of his jacket reads Security. But at the same time, he does have a legitimate-looking service bar pinned to his left breast, so it's difficult to say. He certainly maintains himself like a colonel, staying well out of harm's way while others do the fighting for him. His only redeeming quality, really, is that he does provide us with a rocket launcher. I also think that Cubbage deliberately poshes up his accent to the point that he sounds like both an Eton and a Royal Military Academy Sandhurst graduate. Now, I know that my own accent is a bit dodgy, as it's a mishmash of Belfast, London, and Seattle, but Cubbage's is most unnatural sounding. Now, what is strange to me is that in Half-Life 2, which is supposedly located in Eastern Europe, every single person in the game is from North America, and probably the United States, with the sole exception of Father Grigory and now Odessa Cubbage. I don't understand why the one British person in the game has to be such a twit. Thanks a lot, Valve. No, I do realise that Cubbage is supposed to be a bit of a comedic relief, and indeed he does remind me somewhat of a John Cleese parody of an army officer.
Farewell, and please tell Dr. Vance that Colonel Cubbage regrets not having been able to rescue him in person.
There's a lot of speculation about where precisely in the real world Half-Life 2 takes place. Most agree that it's in Eastern Europe in a former Soviet state, but I've heard plenty of differing opinions on where specifically we're located. My own personal opinion is that City 17 is the Ukrainian city of Odessa, and the seascapes we're traversing along the Highway 17 chapter are the coast of the Black Sea. Certainly the biggest clue so far is the coincidental name of Odessa Cubbage and his resistance camp, which itself is known as New Little Odessa. The city of Odessa would certainly be consistent with what we have seen so far in the game. Odessa in real life is a major seaport, as is City 17 apparently from the large number of canals and shipping terminals surrounding its outskirts, and even the architecture of the city of Odessa resembles much of that in City 17. Odessa as a location would also be in keeping with the maps that we've seen so far of the area, which tend to show land on the west and sea on the east. And look out for those sea monsters. For me, the most memorable part of Highway 17 is the bridge. Now, of course, we cross many bridges along this road, but I'm referring to the bridge, and if you don't know which one I'm talking about, I don't think you've ever played the game. What astounded me the most about the bridge the first time I saw it was its intricate construction. No detail has been left out, and the steel girders and huge concrete pylons of this massive cantilevered railroad bridge are absolutely amazing. Really, I hope you'll agree with me that this is an entirely fantastic model, and what a large amount of work it must have been to create it, so a job very well done by the game's 3D modelers on the bridge. We're very high up from the surface of the sea, and balancing our way across the crisscrossing girders creates a palpable sense of tension. The tendency with great heights is to tell yourself not to look down, yet we all do, regardless, and even here in a game, doing so produces a very real but enjoyable sense of anxiety. Much like in real life, no one wants to fall to their death in a video game either. As we come to the end of our road at Lighthouse Point, we meet a man who is absolutely obsessed with our putting the scout car in the garage. Good idea, mate. The Combine would never think to look for a car inside of a garage. Like elsewhere in the game before, we've unknowingly led the Combine directly to this location, and arrive immediately preceding an attack. However, these soldiers are not terribly difficult to dispatch, as they jump out of the dropships with a frightening consistency directly into your line of fire. Brains will always prevail over brawn. The lighthouse itself is another beautifully constructed model, much like the bridge, and what a coincidence that the rockets were stored up at the top, ensuring that we would have to climb its entire height in order to shoot down the incoming gunship. After we beat off the Combine's assault, we finally bid a tearful adieu to our trusty scout car, which, like Eli Vance, has now been captured by the Combine, and is now flying off into the sunset to endure a fate which we can only guess, but may very well involve being melted down to create body armor for the Combine soldiers. Oh, I wish Odessa Cubbage were here. He'd get that scout car back for us.